Tonight we are going to learn, Bezrat Hashem, the last part of this letter of the Alter Rebbe, which is chapter 26 in the Igeret HaKodesh, the holy letters, quote-unquote, of the Alter Rebbe. Starting from the beginning of this letter, quote-unquote letter, it's like a discourse, what we call it letters, because it was a letter. The Alter Rebbe discussed based on the Zohar, the Raya Mahemna, which indicates that when Mashiach comes, we're not going to be learning the parts of the Torah which discuss mundane matters, because they don't deal openly with purity and impurity, korbanot, sacrifices, offerings. And so the Alter Rebbe said it can't be. It can't be that that's the understanding and interpretation of the Zohar, because that would imply that there's at least one part of the Torah, for example, which deals with damages, which is considered from the tree of knowledge, which there's a potential for bad. When Mashiach comes, we'll only be involved with the tree of life, which is all spiritual. That can't be, because every single word of the Torah is holy, divine. It can't be associated even a drop with the concept of Ra, of evil, even a potential. So the Alter Rebbe explained at great length was that when the Zohar says that we're not going to learn the Torah, it doesn't mean we're not going to learn the Torah. We're not going to be involved with a subject, with an item which is perhaps non-kosher. Because there's nothing going to be in the world when Mashiach comes that's non-kosher. But the Torah which is divine, we will learn the entire Torah, even subjects which discuss mundane matters and matters which seem to be totally remote from spirituality. We're going to learn that too, because every word of the Torah is divine. Basically, in short, what we learned in last week's class, and that's going to lead in to today's lesson, is that how is it that the Torah discusses subjects which are not clearly divine? Seemingly, the Torah shouldn't even be talking about these subjects, because they're not holy. The answer is because the Torah, Shabal Peh, namely the oral Torah, which is connected to Malchut, which is kingdom, is the level of Torah which gets enclosed, so to speak, into different garments and different layers of understanding, different layers of bringing down these divine, holy, pure concepts into the realm of this world. So that's why it's possible to make a mistake and to think that the Torah, at least these parts of the Torah, have come down to a low level. The Torah still remains divine. It's just in different garments. That's the point. Okay? Now if you have the text, fine. If not, listen along. In the lessons in Tanya, bottom of page 151. And this is what it says in the Gemara. Kol ha'osek b'Torah, whoever learns Torah, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty blessed be He states, Ma'aleh ani alav, I consider for Him, Ki'ilu p'da'ani, as if He redeemed me. Listen to these words. Hashem needs to be redeemed. Ki'ilu p'da'ani, the Talmud says this. Ki'ilu, Avram Fried has a song. Ki'ilu p'da'ani, v'yes b'hanai. In other words, there is a concept of Hashem's, quote unquote, not literally, but metaphorically, that as if I was redeemed and my children were redeemed from the nations of the world. Because that's really the point of what happens. When we learn Torah, what are we doing? We're not allowing the Torah to remain at this level with all the garments. We redeem, so to speak, the spirituality, quote unquote. We redeem Hashem from being enclosed into these terminologies which deal with materialism and perhaps even impurity, and it's almost clearly related to the tree of life and not the tree of knowledge. Not only the tree of knowledge. And that's really what the underlining common denominator is in this whole chapter. When Mashiach comes, we're going to learn every part of Torah. What does that mean? It's not going to be covered up anymore in the different packages, in the different layers, in the different garments. It's going to be redeemed. That when we say Geula, Mashiach is going to bring the world to redemption. It doesn't only mean there's not going to be any murderers anymore. It also means that. But perhaps, first and foremost, the Shekhinah, the divine presence. This week's Parsha, we say, in today's Chumash, we say, what's the words of the Chumash? What are the divine providence? V'shav Hashem Elokecha et shavutcha v'rechamecha. Hashem will return. Doesn't mean Hashem will bring us back. Rashi says this. It's almost as if Hashem himself will return. Why? This is a whole story for itself, a whole subject for itself, but it's very, very related to here. When Hashem sees us in galut, in exile, He Himself is in exile. It's God forbid, like a person who their child is in captivity or in exile or in a difficult situation, and the parent themselves wants to be there with the child, doesn't want the child to be alone, wants to help the child get out of that situation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the ultimate parent, doesn't say, okay, you're in exile, in the right time I'll take you out. I'm above you and I'll take you out. No! The parent wants to be with the child. Hashem wants to be with us in Galut. It doesn't mean, obviously, that He's limited by the Galut. Usually when a person's in jail or in exile or in captivity, they can't get out on their own. Hashem, obviously, no one can control over Hashem. Hashem Himself, it's in His infinite knowledge that He decides to be in a certain situation, but He's not really limited to that situation. So when we learn Torah, we're bringing redemption for the Shekhinah. Believe me, if Hashem goes out of the exile, we'll all go out of exile. The Rebbe calls it the inner galut, the inner exile. The external exile, everyone understands. Oh, no more stealing, no more murder, no more oppression. But what's the inner galut? That's all external. It's correct, but it's all external. What's the real galut that we need to be concerned about? Is that Hashem is in galut. It's like the Rebbe went around the table and asked everyone, what do you want, what do you want, what do you want, all the 100 people? And one guy said, I want Mashiach to come. He said, genius. When you have that, everyone's problems will be taken care of. One minor thing. Just Mashiach should come. And that's what we're saying over here. Hashem says, learn Torah. Ki'ilu p'ta'ani. When you learn Torah and you reveal, you uncover all the layers, and you learn the Torah not only the way it is in the literal level, but also on the metaphorical level, on the spiritual level, then you're redeeming me. In other words, you're bringing Mashiach. You're bringing me closer. I think it's an amazing concept. So let's now learn together, page 152, or in your Tanya. It's right where it says that 11th of Cheshvan. It's right there. I'm going to read just the English now, because we need to cover some ground. The next class is going to be after the Chagim, so we're gonna cruise along. Someone asked me, well, are you going to cruise quickly or slowly? I usually associate cruising with zooming. Okay. But when the Shekhinah, when the divine presence will emerge from the Klipat Noga, after the extraction of the sparks will be completed, and the evil of the Klipot will be separated from the good of holiness, and all the workers of evil will be dispersed, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is Klipat Noga, that gray area of Klippa, and which prevails during the time of exile, will no longer be dominant, because the good will have departed from it. Top of 153 in the Lessons of Tanya. Then, when Mashiach comes, the first... Oh, I forgot that it's different pages, right? I'm sorry about that. Please give me your book for a second. So it's 7th of Cheshvan. So we're at the 11th of Cheshvan, right here. Achar sheyushlam Aval b'tzeisa shchina Achar sheyushlam. Then, right here, then. I'm not going to say the page numbers now because it's just going to confuse people. Then people will engage in the study of Torah and in the observance of the commandments, not in order to extract the sparks as in the current time right now. Because then we're already going to get rid of all of those sparks that fell down. We learned last week or a couple of weeks ago about all the sparks, and that's the purpose of us elevating these holy sparks. Rather, but in order to bring about the consummation of yichudim, more sublime than those which are affected through our present Torah study, in order to call forth more sublime light transcending Atzilut. So we're not going to have to worry about the spirituality having gone down in all the lower levels and taking it out and redeeming them. It will be redemption. We'll have already completed the redemption process. So what are we going to do then? We're going to be involved in reaching higher and higher levels in spirituality, which is Ein Sof, it's unlimited. This is explained in the writings of the Arizal, the Holy Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, of blessed memory. Everything will be accomplished by means of the pnimiyut of the Torah, the innermost part of the Torah, the esoteric dimension of the Torah, by the performance of the commandments which with lofty mystical devotions directed to drawing down sublime lights from the divine luminary. For the root of the commandments is exceedingly high, in the blessed Ein Sof, at a level loftier than Atzilut. As for the statement of our sages of blessed memory, that commandments will be abrogated in the future, so how are we saying now that we're going to do the mitzvahs, but they're just going to be climbing higher and higher? This refers to the era of the resurrection of the dead. That's a much later stage. In the days of Mashiach, however, before the resurrection of the dead, they will not be abrogated. At the time, the observance of mitzvot will draw down to this world even higher levels of godliness than those drawn down by the current observance of mitzvot. This is why Torah study will then be mainly directed to the pnimiyut, the innermost mystical depths of the commandments and their hidden reasons. Specifically, gaining insights into the dynamics of the above-mentioned yichudim, and thereby understanding why this scrupulous performance of the commandments brings about the supernal unions which give birth to renewed diffusions of the divine light that animates this world. In short, very, very short, this is a very, very high concept of yichudim. Actually, there are some people, before every mitzvah, they say, L'shem yichud kudsha brichosh kante. There are unions that are formed in the above levels. And actually, this is why in Shir HaShirim, in the Song of Songs, and very often in the Kabbalah, the example of the relationship between Hashem and Am Yisroel is of husband and wife. Because the unions that are formed down here are only metaphorical for the ultimate unions above in the higher levels between Chachma and Bina and the intellect and the emotions, many, many different levels. That's what we do when we accomplish a mitzvah. We are bringing about, yes, through our practical mitzvot in this physical world, we bring about the greatest unions which bring about offspring, so quote unquote, and which the offspring is light and elevation in this world. So when Mashiach comes, we're not going to have to elevate the sparks. We're just going to be involved with bringing more and more yichudim and unions above, which are going to bring more and more light to the entire world, the entire solar system. The revealed aspects of the Torah, however, will be manifest and known to every Jew by an innate and unforgotten knowledge. Therefore, review will thus be unnecessary. Anything which counters, anything which is the opposite of revelation, of remembering, which is forgetfulness, darkness, concealment, night, all of the above will not be around when Mashiach comes. Because there will not be any more coverings, any more layers. It's all going to be revealed every moment on a much, much greater level than the moment before. Only the mixed multitude and the non-Jews will have to toil these aspects of Torah. Those who will be around, in order for them to the Erev Rav, for example, to get to that level, they'll have to really toil, because they will not have merited to taste from the tree of life, which is the pnimiyut of the Torah, the innermost aspect of the Torah, and of the commandments. They will therefore need to engage in Torah, in Mishnah, in order to weaken by their occupation with Torah the power of the Sitra Achra, of the other side of the Klippa that cleaves to them, so that it will not dominate them and cause them to do sin. Thus it is written, and the sinner at the age of 100 will be cursed. This refers to the sinners of the mixed multitude of the Erev Rav. Thus, even with the arrival of Mashiach, there will be sinners among the mixed multitude, since the Sitra Achra cleaves to them. They will therefore require means by which to weaken it, so they will not sin. Nor will they need only the revealed aspects of the Torah in order to repel the Sitra Achra. One moment, please. Thank you. L'chaim. In addition, on the practical level, they will need the detailed rulings of the prohibition and impurity more than the Jews. For the latter, nothing will occur that is ritually unfit, impure, or forbidden. Since there shall not befall any sin to the righteous, and in the era of Mashiach, all Jews will be at the level of the righteous. The Amech Kulam Tzadikim, even now, but then it will be more revealed. It is also possible, and indeed probable, that the Jewish people will know all the fundamentals of the revealed plane of the Torah from the pnimiyut of the Torah, as was the case with our father Abraham, peace be alav hashalom, peace be unto him. In other words, how did he know the Torah? He knew the Chabad, he knew the mitzvah, he knew the pnimiyut of the Torah, he knew the inner aspect of the Torah. From that, he was able to derive certain mitzvot. But for him, it was clear the inner part of the Torah. Same thing for us. When Mashiach comes. Right now, first we learn the regular part of the Torah, the revealed part of the Torah. And then we also learn it on an esoteric level. When Mashiach comes, it's all going to be revealed. So we're not going to need the layers. We're going to go right to the essence. They will therefore not need to occupy themselves with them, with the laws defining what is permitted and prohibited, pure and impure at all. Because it's just going to be the tree of life. Everything is going to be clear. Everything is going to be pure. Everything is going to be eternal. Masha'en came at the time of the Second Temple. By contrast, although the scholars did not derive their sustenance from the illiterate, for they had their own fields and vineyards, nonetheless, they needed to be involved in these laws. In other words, they may not have had to deal with the actual item which is mixed good and bad, but the Torah teachings of these issues they did have to learn. And not only for their practical application, but because this is the main purpose of the divine service. To weaken the power of the Sitra Achra and to elevate the sparks of the holiness by means of the Torah study and the worship as it is explained elsewhere. After the above words of the truth, it will be possible to clearly understand the earlier quoted passage from the Raya Mahemna, which spoke of the tree of good and evil, prohibition and permission, meaning Klipat Noga, which is the mainstay of this world, as is written in the Eitz HaChaim. At the moment, until Mashiach arrives, the dominant influence in the material world is Klipat Noga, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. After his arrival, however, when Mashiach comes, this dominion will cease, and man's divine service will be directed not to extracting the sparks of holiness hidden in the material world, rather to bringing about even ever higher supernal unions, as explained above. This will suffice for the discerning. So, in summary of what we've learned up until now, which is the chapter 26 of the Tanya, we learned that right now, during the time of Galut, during the time of exile, and in these final moments before Mashiach comes, whether we are more simple and not as Torah knowledgeable, or even the Torah scholars, each one on their own level, we derive our life and our connection to Torah through the quote-unquote tree of knowledge, which means that there is a potential for negative, for bad. It doesn't mean that the Torah is bad, God forbid. All it means is that the Torah teaches us lessons which are connected to objects which are bad, or at least potential for bad. When Mashiach comes, one second please, before that, in practical terms, when we do the mitzvahs, what are we doing? We are elevating the good from the bad, because there is potential. We're still involved with the negativity. Now let's move on to when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, the Torah that we learn and the mitzvahs that we do are only going to be on a pure level, on a good level, without any connection to bad, because there will not be any bad anymore, and just climbing the ladder within goodness itself. Going higher and higher and being able to ascend to a higher level and to be able to connect to Hashem. Therefore, our aspiration, what we need to go away from this chapter, not from this chapter, but with the chapter, is that we want that Mashiach should come. There should be an end not only to all evil around us, as far as no more murder and no more oppression and no more hunger. Rather, within good itself, we should be able to climb higher and higher. We should be able to aspire to connect to Hashem every single moment, to climb higher and higher. Bezrat Hashem. Thank you so much for joining us. And should be Bezrat Hashem, lots of success, a great new year. And Bezrat Hashem will continue this year after the Chagim of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Simchat Torah. Thank you.